Welcome back to the MindGoals Podcast, hosted by yours truly, Siobhan Higgins, sport and performance psychology consultant, soccer player, yoga instructor, and soccer coach. The MindGoals Podcast is a space that I hold for myself, other athletes, and other athletic personnel so that we can converse and discuss how we acquired the mindset that we have today, all with the goal in mind that any listeners or viewers can improve their mindset as well. Today, I'm really honored to have another Olympic gold medalist on this show. He is also a professor in sport and performance psychology at my former University of St. Thomas, Mike Marsh.
All right, thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm so glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So the way that we start the show, I always tell people how we know each other because a lot of my guests are people I know. Very few I've met on air.
Okay.
And so this was cool for me, but my audience does not really know this, but I coach soccer at the British International School of Houston. And this was my past year. The past year was my first year coaching there and coaching soccer. And at our athletic banquet, I was so excited to hear our guest speaker. And it was you. And I thought sitting there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I mean, they went through your accolades more than I just did. And we're going to get into those so that people know what you medaled in. But yeah, that's how I met you. And then I came up to him and I asked if he would be on the podcast, if we could connect. And come to find out, he's a professor at my university. And so I was like, how did our paths not cross before? But you got put in front of the stage for me, so I was really excited. And I was texting my producer, and I was like, "We need to get him on the show."
Okay, all right. Yeah. Well, good.
So,
no, glad it worked out. I really enjoyed that banquet. A good friend of mine, David Maris. He's a track coach, and he invited me over, and it was wonderful to meet you there, and happy to be here. Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for being able to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And so, without further ado, I do want to get into a little bit about your background, and for the audience listening, he's a track athlete, and former track athlete, former track coach as well. But originally, where are you from?
I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. After I did elementary school and high school there, I went to UCLA, and after UCLA, I moved to Houston to continue to train. But my roots are in LA. My love of track and field started in LA. Yeah. And it's real quick about that community. It's absolutely full of talent. Yeah. We used to organize competitions on the street, a little bit, and just the neighborhood kids. And so we'd have competitions between like my block, the next block, and sometimes we'd go 6 or 7 blocks over, and it was it was amazing, the organizational skills, of the kids. And so, we do all kinds of things. Most of that was, football, street ball. And, of course, I was either, safety or wide receiver because I was fast. And so, that's kind of how I started. Played a little basketball, did a lot of things, but the athletic foundation just kind of started from
the neighborhood.
Yeah, just the neighborhood and kids organizing it. It's very different from, the way we do things now, but I'm probably maybe the tail end of the last generation where the kids kind of did that.
Yeah. I was about to say I did that too. My neighborhood, I lived in a neighborhood with a cul-de-sac, and so there were so many kids in our block. I think at one point there was like 22, and I was like one of the only girls, and I'd go out there with the boys playing baseball, running acorn fights, like all that stuff, and you would know whose house anyone was at because all the bikes and all the scooters were in the front yard. I remember those days too. Just competing against the boys made me better too. And tougher.
No, that neighborhood competition, and it's good for you. It was serious. And I met some very, very talented people, that I had to go up against. So
And what high school did you go to in LA?
I went to Hawthorne High School. Hawthorne's a very, very famous for track and field.
Really?
Yeah, we had an incredible team, especially during the 80s there. And just full of talent. A side note, my junior year at Hawthorne, I could not make the 4x1 relay team. Oh. Yeah, and that's just how much talent we had in the area, and especially at the school. And so, those things are, they're really good for development that kind of have that kind of competition, especially within a team.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mentioned I'm a sport and performance consultant. It's what I do for work. And I speak with track athletes as well. And so I'm sure they would love to hear this. And it's, it's difficult when I also ran track, but in middle school and like 1 year in high school, I did hurdles.
Okay.
But for me, and for the kids listening, maybe a piece of advice, right? Because you've made it to the Olympics. You made it to one of the highest levels ever and did it well. But you just mentioned, in high school, you weren't even on, maybe at one point you didn't make the 4x1, right? And so to someone in high school thinking, I won't be able to make it because it's just high school right now, right? You can still get better. You're still growing. You can still put in the work to get to another level. Like what was your thought as a maybe 16, 17 age-old kid at that time?
I don't think that I would have been able to articulate this, what I'm about to say, at that age. However, I always had fun, right?
Okay, yeah, good.
And that sounds, that sounds simple, but our coach taught us to enjoy the sport, okay? And so you can enjoy the sport at whatever level you're at, right? And really get, just a lot of joy out of it, and just a lot of fun, and you just enjoy trying and enjoying working. I think we live in a society where we're so preoccupied with performance, right?
Yes.
That somehow we believe if we're not at the top that we're not having fun. It's 100% like not true.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't have to be your mindset. You just have to figure out like how to have fun, and when I look back on it, I had a lot of fun.
Good.
A whole lot of fun. Didn't make the relay team, but I was the kind of kid, I never missed a day of practice. I was disappointed, of course, that I couldn't make the team. But the fact that I wanted to be out there every day, and my coach will tell you, I worked hard, did everything I could, didn't work out, but I had fun the entire time. And so I think there's this misnomer that, your level of performance has something to do with how much fun you're having. And you can fool yourself into thinking like, oh, I don't like this because I'm not performing at the level, I want to perform at. It's disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, acknowledge that. But it doesn't have the relationship to your love of the sport that many people think it does.
Yeah. I think it's important to keep the fun in it. And a lot of the time, maybe coaches do take that away from the child. I think I've seen it quite a lot, but it's good to hear that you had a positive influence, or at least someone that, you wanted to show up your day in, day out. And I was a player that never missed a day of training either. No matter what sport it was, I was going to be there. And that to me was the fun part too. And just being with the teammate as well, being around other people, just competing, right? Wanting to beat someone out. And so that leads into my next question is, track is, yes, individual, but it's also team oriented as well, especially in relays. What was it like trying to, beat out some of your teammates, and how would you maybe advise some athletes right now who are competing against their friends and they're, want to be happy for them, but at the same time are trying to beat them, and they're disappointed that maybe they're not placing where they want to be?
I think it just takes a bit of understanding the nature of the game. In our school, the way my coach did it was very, very fair and very democratic. If you wanted to be on the relay team, you had to do a runoff with the slowest person. That's it. That's the way it is. And the result of that competition determined who was going to be on the relay team. And it doesn't have to be. I think kids and maybe even parents and people around can kind of make that more competitive or more uncomfortable, than is necessary. But the purpose of the team is to put the best people out there. Yeah. And so I think you have to remember when you're on a team, it's like anything, even if you're doing something intellectual or whatever happens with a team, is you sharpen each other. Iron sharpens iron, right? And so we make each other sharp. Everyone's not going to make it. And, it's kind of related to what I was saying before. That doesn't mean that you can't have fun, cheering on the rest of the team. And you can't do this not can't. It's difficult to do this at higher levels, but, our coach required us to kind of cheer for everybody else, you know. Yeah. And even though that may not have been, I think it was a brilliant thing to do, even though it may not come naturally, sometimes the behavior has to come first before it actually shows up in your attitude, when you're actually happy for people who are doing things that you would have liked to do, right?
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that answer because, at the end of the day, you're right, it is a team and you are making each other better. And so that is something that I think a lot of athletes should pay attention to, is that although you're maybe not at the top yet, these people are making you better. And as a team and like as a school, right, you're representing the badge or whatever it is on your jersey or your shirt. And it's best to, just keep that competition high, but also have a little bit of maturity as well. And it does take time. Like, you can be disappointed, you can be sad, but you got to be a good teammate and have some integrity as well. No,
absolutely. And, the only thing I would add is it's incredibly important to be self-aware, and be aware of your mental state. And the worst thing that you can do is compare yourself to someone else, right? Yeah. That's very difficult to do because most sports are structured in such a way. Everyone around you is doing that very thing, right? They're comparing you to other people. If you ever get your name in the paper and the first time that happens, in high school, they're comparing you to somebody else. Yeah. The results, the runoffs for the relays, everything, it seems like they're comparing, but the only real competition is, you against you. Yeah. And that's an internal skill that you have to develop, even though you live in an environment. And I think parents can also teach that, as well. You have to, exude that, I think, in the way that you operate, with your kids. And it's a win when you're better than yourself. And you have to figure out like how to bring those things out, shine a light on them so that kids actually understand that, okay, this is the point for me to be better than myself. Yeah. And I'll add, even though, I said I came from a very, very competitive, neighborhood. I'm an Olympic gold medalist, right? However, I know 3 or 4 people that I grew up with who can run circles around me. Wow. Right? Yeah. I was blessed enough to have the opportunity, but for social reasons or neighborhood reasons, lots of things that were going on. Some people were in jail. Some people never made it. They didn't have, the opportunity, right? And so it's kind of a misnomer to think that, I'm the fastest guy in the world. I'm the fastest guy that was there, right? Got an opportunity to do it. But if I'm real honest, about it, like, I met some people when I was younger. If they had the same opportunity, same coaches, same stuff, I would not be, right? And it's really all about. But I'm very proud of the journey. You know, I got faster. For some people, that means, hey, you get a gold medal out of it. For others, that may mean that you're a really good contributor. You're on your high school team, but all of us, what makes us common is we all have to hang up the shoes at some point, right? It just happens at different points, and it doesn't have I don't think it has any relationship whatsoever to how happy you can be in the sport. You can retire in middle school or high school, college, or after a professional career, but we're all the same in that sense. Everybody hangs up the shoes.
You're right. I know. Yeah. And it's tough to do that as well. But I was going to ask you, you answered my question, if, you think maybe some talent is missed due to lack of resources or availability or what's the opportunities. And so that does happen across a lot of sports and, everywhere, I think. And it is a shame. But, sometimes it's not their destiny, I suppose. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, absolutely. That happens. And I think that's where the improvements are going to come, in the future. We have barely tapped into all the talent that our country has to offer. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure other countries are in the same position, as well. It's a serious problem. Like, how do we identify and develop talent? Yes. And that depends on first getting people exposed to the sport. You also have to have a certain level of technical knowledge, just to develop the athletes. But I think early on, you need simple things like being able to teach athletes like what competition is all about. Yeah. And so my high school coach was very instrumental in the sense that he did a wonderful thing for me as he taught me how to love track and field. More fundamentally, he taught me how to love to struggle, right? And that's the thing that I carried with me, forever. And you have to place that, I think, in an appropriate priority, right? Yeah. To be mentally healthy, I will say this: you have to love to struggle more than you love winning, right?
Yeah, love the grind is what we call it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the journey. It's the journey.
Yeah, and people who kind of grew up with me or known me along the way, you'll hear them often say it. It's like, I really think like Mike may enjoy training more than he loves competition, right? And that actually comes from my coach, and it kind of comes from a mindset that I built over years and years and years. And I really did enjoy, training, and I think I may have enjoyed it more than the competition. And it's just something to think about.
Yeah.
Because you keep thinking, we talked earlier about, hey, I can't be in this sport because I'm not performing well. Well, can you work?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you go out to practice and try? And can you focus on enjoying that? Whether you make any team, or not. And I think that's one of the fundamental keys to really enjoying the sport, and to take out all of this, kind of performance-based, just unhealthiness that floats like everywhere, and you really have to have a strong countercultural sense in terms of your values. It's going to help sustain you.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We can call this the Mike Marsh mentality now. I really haven't thought of it from that perspective. I mean, I, as an athlete, when I played more competitively, I love showing up to training. Now my purpose is to show up for fun. But before, I would let you know, like, it really wasn't, I'm coming because it's fun. It's coming because I had a task or a goal or a mission, or I wanted to get somewhere. And so it was more like task oriented. But I would tell kids to enjoy the ride, because the ride and the journey is the fun part. Sure, scoring a goal or winning a medal or getting a plaque, that's great, and that feels awesome as well. And it feels more rewarding because it's like all that fun work in the middle paid off. But it pays off in many other ways. Like if you never medal, if you never make, win a championship, right? Lionel Messi, just to make a soccer reference, he's one of the best players in the world, just finally won a World Cup, just now, like this past World Cup. And so it's not that he's finally made it. People will put it that way, but he's made it so many other ways as well. Yeah. And it's the meat of the journey that is the good part. And me looking back is like, I didn't see that. And now I teach athletes, right? Like, make sure you're stopping, looking back, and seeing your progress and enjoying it right now. Like, and making sure you're doing it because you enjoy it, because that is so important. It helps you sustain the attitude and the Mike Marsh mentality.
Well, and it's a skill that you can take with you wherever you go.
Yep.
Right. I retired from track and field, for a long time ago. I know from track and field that things aren't going to be easy, but the skills I learned from struggling, right? Yeah. You carry them where I raise kids. That's a struggle, right? I've got two in college. I've got a senior in high school. Now. You struggle from time to time. Yeah. But if you you can have fun with athletics, even if you never make it anywhere close to being a professional.
Right.
You can be a professional at knowing like how to struggle, like how to have a hard day, how to end up in the mud, right? And how to figure out like how to get out, right? You do that over and over and over again. You can take that to whatever you're going to do, in life. And that's much, much, much more. And I say this boldly, it's much, much more valuable than any medal that you may see around my house, or anything. It's like knowing how to struggle and not getting depressed because I'm in the mud again. And I was like, I know how to handle that. I was like, I've been there over and over and over and over and over and over again.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so you just know and just build that resiliency. And it's very applicable across life. It really is. Like, I don't like to say life is a game because it's not. We only get one chance at it. Right. But everything that is created in your path, even for athletes more specifically, that is teaching you and it's setting you up for what you're going to eventually be doing, because sport is not life. That, right, at some point we all have that in common. We hang up the boots, hang up the shoes, and what you learn you can take take forward. And then you teach other people, which is the goal as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I did want to ask, I probably should have asked earlier, but we mentioned you went to UCLA, Hall of Fame.
Right.
Shout out. That's actually so cool. What was it like getting to UCLA? Was it difficult? I'm assuming you got like a scholarship to run as well, but it's a really hard school, and it's like, I don't know, one of the best in the world and one of the best in the nation. What was your experience like getting there? Was it difficult?
Well, it's very related to my high school experience because, actually I didn't get a scholarship.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a walk-on.
Very cool. I love that. UCLA. I love an underdog story too.
Yeah. So, and that comes from my coach as well. Like, I wanted to be around the best track athletes I could possibly be around, given the choices I had at the time. We had an incredible team that I wanted to join, and I didn't make that relay team either. But what I learned very, very early on was just the value of struggle. And so I actually turned down 4 full scholarships so that I could walk on at UCLA, because that's the place where I would struggle the most, right? And so a lot of kids need to be taught that. That you don't run from, you look for a struggle, right? And there are lots of places where I could have been the best guy, on the team, but where's the struggle, on that? I joined a team where it was like, okay, am I going to even be able to make the relay team, here? What else am I going to be able to do? And it's going to be a struggle. And so, once you struggle like over and over again and you understand the underlying value of it, you don't run from it. And that allows you to develop. And that's why I say the struggle is, it's more important than winning. And that's kind of a paradox, because the more you care about winning as your primary objective, the less likely it's going to happen. That's the kind of way that works. The flip side of that works, as well. The more you care about struggle, the more you care about your development, the more likely it is, that you're going to win.
Yep.
And you have to understand that. And you have to, make decisions, kind of consistent with that principle, and this is kind of a paradox as well, because it sounds like I'm preaching that, if you do this, you'll win, but winning's not the most important thing. Right. Yeah. It actually happened to me as part of my journey. But it was never the goal. And I never set goals that had anything to do with being a gold medalist. It wasn't in my psyche, my opinion, but I didn't do that. I never said I wanted to be a gold medalist. It was like, no, I want to reach my potential, and that's how I set goals. Okay. And my potential happened to be, a gold medal, but it didn't necessarily, have to be, either. Yeah. And I had fun, along the way, and my best memories are training memories, like we said. My best memories are, it's a good memory being on the Olympic stand, but my best memories are training memories. Yeah.
Very cool. I do really appreciate it. I appreciate this perspective, and especially for the athletes listening, because sometimes people lose sight in what they're doing, and you are learning so much in the meat of the journey, in the struggle. The meat of the journey is a struggle, just so everyone knows that it's not easy, right? You do it for fun. You do it because you're growing, because you're gaining new skills along the way. And it's just developing you into a much more resilient human, to be able to be more equipped to take on what life throws your way, because life will throw you some curveballs, you just got to deal with it. You just really have to. And I love that sports teach that to people.
Yeah. And, I like the word you use, resiliency. That is more important than anything, right? It's something, I have a whole section in my class that I teach on resiliency, and we dig deep into that. I have lots of non-athletes in my class, like to your point. And no problem. Lots of non-athletes in my class, and everyone enjoys it because the principles that we teach, the principles that we teach in sports psychology are applicable to everything, and everybody finds it, finds it interesting, and that's very rewarding as well, just to see students kind of take to all the teaching. Because I got a call the other day from one of my old students, and she was telling me, she was like, I really mean this. Like I think about your lectures like every day.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Which is and we talk about resiliency. We talk about anxiety. We talk about keeping your mind in the present, and different ways that you can do that. And I think for a lot of students it resonates. And those are timeless teachings. And we have fun in class, figuring out, all that stuff. And, and it's interesting in class, we never had a competition. Nobody ever won, like anything. Right. And we're just thinking about like how to develop more and more.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds fun. I again, so when I mentioned that, for listeners, my degree is in sport and performance psychology. You teach a sport and performance psychology class, or one of the courses under that.
Right. I teach introductory sports psychology.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we cover a lot of different subjects, and what's good about it is they give me a lot of. I've got some boundaries that I have to stay within when I teach, but they give me a lot of flexibility, just to design the class in a way that I think is most effective, for the students.
Yeah. And I love that, and I bring up the title again just because it's, if you take away sport, it's still performance psychology, and you do not have to be an athlete to perform, or like anything you're doing is just, and like I will say performance, but I'll say that lightly because I also teach yoga, and yoga is not a performance, but you are somewhat making like a performance. You know what I'm trying to say? It's not you're not, no one's judging you. This isn't like, did you hit the form perfectly? No, you are practicing. But again, the class and the coursework is for anyone. And I think that's probably why someone calls you and tells you that I listen to this daily, or I hear this daily, and I take this with me each day because it's applicable across the board everywhere. Right.
Yeah, you get it. You get it in all different areas of life. I mean, at this point in my life, I'm a pretty good amateur mechanic, actually, right? And same principles from track and field. I used to take my cars to to people and get them fixed and everything. And one day, I figured out that I actually get a lot of joy, and that's the reason I do it. My grandfather was a mechanic, taught me a lot of stuff, and so it allows me some time to think about all the wisdom that he passed down to me as I'm changing my oil or spark plugs or whatever I'm doing. And I'm pretty good at it.
Good.
So I have a nearly 10-year-old car now that has been in the mechanic like once.
Wow.
Because I don't pull transmissions or anything. I don't have the equipment for that. But I've struggled to figure out a few things, and that that gives me a lot of joy, and it's rewarding. I take my car to the mechanic. He comes out. He's like, he looked at my engine and he's like, this thing is really clean. Like I don't see this, very often, and that's just the application of the same kind of athletic discipline to maintenance discipline.
Yep.
You look at my notes, I've got dates, I've got mileage, I've got all that stuff, just kind of written down. And these kind of principles just work in all different areas of life.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
I do, since we mentioned, I wonder if everyone's on their edge of their seat about the Olympics, just to get into it. It was 1992 Barcelona Olympics.
Right.
For your first one.
Right. No, actually, I was in 1988 in Seoul. No medals. I was an alternate.
Okay.
And I never touched the track, but I was on the roster.
Okay.
There. But yes, 1992 was the first time I ever touched the track. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And then you returned again the following Olympics.
Right.
Okay. And so will you tell us about that experience? Tell us about the atmosphere, about the possible nerves, or were you just having fun?
No, there's definitely potential for nerves, and I think I would say I was extremely tempted, to be nervous, and to do, and to try to do something special, because it was the Olympics. However, I had a very extremely wise coach, and so, he walked me around. I'll never forget this. We took just a walk around the track. Nobody's there. We got access to the stadium, and he told me, he said, look, all you have to remember is that the physical principles of sprinting and gravity and all the things we've learned and practiced, as it pertains to physics, are the same here as they are in Houston. Mm-hmm. There's no difference. The same way you practice at our track over at University of Houston, the same things you do there are the things that you should do here. No difference. That's why you practice.
Yeah.
And he just drove home like really simple things. You do what you practice. That's why you practice. Yeah. So nothing special. Just do what you train to do. And nervousness and anxiety is related to and has a lot to do with our tendency to, inject drama, into a situation when drama is not going to increase our performance, at all. And you have to be very disciplined, about that. Give you an example. I mean, when I was running the 200, my thoughts were very mundane, and they're not very exciting, at all, but they made me very fast.
200 open, correct?
Yeah. You may not understand like what all these things mean that, I'm about to say, but they're very simple, like track and field principles, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm sitting, I'm in the set position, gun is up, getting ready to shoot it, and gun goes off, and all I say to myself is, okay, we're going to drive out at a 45-degree angle. We're going to accelerate very smoothly. We're going to accelerate until we get to, top speed, which should happen at about 120 meters. Okay. Right. And then when I get there, all I'm going to do is hold that through relaxation, as best I can. It's not exciting stuff, right?
It's practical though.
Yeah.
It's what should be happening instead of run, push, what people think.
Or it's not like, this is the Olympics. Like I've got to do something extremely special here, and that's not the case at all. You have to make it very simple. You have to take the drama out of it, and you just have to, figure out what you can do mentally so you can perform, the best that you can. Yeah. Everyone has a different formula for that. One trick I used to use, because, I mentioned earlier, people have all kinds of things to say. Yeah. And in track and field, I'm sure it's the same in other sports. People talk, right? Yep. And they talk, 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 until it's just exhausting. Yes. And everyone just have things to say.
Always, they always will.
Yeah. And, anybody can think of creative ways to do this, but I had a grandmother who loved me, like, very much, right? And everyone needs someone in their life where you are the apple of their eye, right? Mm-hmm. And everybody needs that. And everybody doesn't feel that way about me, right? Mm-hmm. But to my grandmother, I was the best grandson, ever, right? And so, in order to take away a lot of the nerves and to get back to just enjoying what I'm doing, I would imagine that the stands only included her.
Oh, that's awesome.
All right.
Like just her or
just her.
A bunch of grandmothers? Like just a bunch?
Just her.
Okay. Okay.
Just her. It's all empty.
Yeah.
It's all empty. She's sitting like right in the middle. She just says, do the best you can. Right. And that allowed me to relax and get back into, my value system, because then it's my grandmother. She doesn't care if I win.
Mm-hmm. She's
right?
going to be happy no matter what. Proud of you.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. And so that way I can figure out like what I need to do the very best I can.
Mm-hmm.
She's not gonna laugh at me. She's not gonna write something crazy about me in a newspaper, right?
Yeah.
She's not a publication. She's not gonna rank me, right? She's not gonna do any of that stuff. And all that's because all that stuff like doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter at all. And so, I think that's also, she teaches a great lesson, I think, to parents, as well, because, athletes need grounding, right? And, it's great to, I think, be excited, for your kids, but I think it's far more important that they are accepted unconditionally, as a primary goal. Yeah. Right. And so they can come to your meets, competitions, and do all that stuff. But the most important thing is just to be, like I said, I'll say it again, accepted unconditionally.
Yeah.
And my grandmother's house was a place I would go when I was in the mud. Right. She didn't have to do a whole lot of talking. I'd walk in and she could kind of tell I was in the mud. And, she said, you want to talk about it? And most of the time I would say, no, just want to sit here. Right. And we just kind of work through. And those are the kind of things that you need. And athletes are human beings. Yeah. Professional athletes are human beings, and they're still designed to be, by design, they need to be loved, yes. Right? And by someone. They don't have to be by everybody, No,
and it won't be.
And it won't be. Yeah.
Right? And we don't want it to be like that either.
Yeah. Just by someone. And so you have to figure out what your needs are. Everyone has the same needs, and you have to figure out like how to meet them, in a very deliberate way. Right. And so your needs don't change because you're the best in the world at something. You still need the same basic things that a preschooler at 2 years old needs. You need to be in some sense cared for, in some way. Yeah. And be humble, admit that, and go get it. Yeah. And it doesn't have to come from everybody, but you have to find, and know where those places are, and be very disciplined in that knowledge.
Yeah. It sounds like you were. I actually really love that I'm able to have you on to have this recorded, just because, people think that in order to make it to such a high level, there's, such a grind, so much pressure, so much on the line. People are rooting for you, but, you make it seem so simple. And sometimes it really might be simple. I'm not saying that I could go out and do the same thing, nor do I want to, but, I like the way that, you took the pressure off yourself, if there ever was, or there's always room for pressure wherever you are in life, whatever your occupation is or sport is. But it seems like you were able to work your way around that, and you just figured it out. Yeah.
And you have to remember, and that's when we can tie that back to struggling, as well. In order to take pressure, off yourself, put yourself in situations where you think you're going to be under pressure over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah. And then you'll figure out, after you've been through that 100 times, and you figure out that you didn't die. Yeah. Right? Uh-huh.
That you did it, that it wasn't so bad.
Yeah. And exactly. And then it allows your mind not to drift into, just thoughts of catastrophe, all the time, and you can go into a high pressure situation and you can say to yourself, and I literally said this to myself, if I go out and I don't win the gold medal, I'm going to live. Yeah. I'm going to be just fine. I'll be disappointed, and everything, but there's no reason just to, have all kinds of undisciplined, crazy thoughts, kind of running through your mind, because you have to have and this comes from your value system, you have to have a central system of governance.
Yes.
And that's mentally, somebody has to be in control. You can't let the emotion just run around and just be in charge, and it can be like an asylum. It's a crazy place, in there. And there has to be some order and some governance. And you finally have to tell your emotions, it's like, look, it's not that bad. Mm-hmm. This is just your imagination.
Yeah.
Another time, like you might say to your emotions, that hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why should we even be, thinking about it or worried about it? And once you do that, like over and over again, see, your emotions become trained.
Yes.
And they know it's like, look, even though I scream, he's not going to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
that doesn't get to him. And so it's just you have to think about all these things, and you have to just establish some sort of order. I'll give a book recommendation as A Road Less Traveled, by M. Scott Peck. I read that several decades ago. In my lifetime, I've at least read it like 15 times because I find the principles in there like so valuable, and just what I just said, he talks about that, and that really resonated, with me, and I practiced over and over again until I kind of got that, and one of his statements is like, look, someone has to be in charge, right? It's like having a classroom. Emotions are like having a classroom full of kids with no teacher, in there, right?
Ooh, that's a good analogy. It's true.
Yeah.
And you need to train them, and you need to stay. And I like that you've used the word discipline across this episode. But you're right. I mean, it's your self-talk, your thoughts. You're controlling them. You control your mind. I mean, again, yoga teacher, but we control your breath, which helps control your thoughts. And then that helps control your actions, and they're all interrelated. But it seems like, I don't know how long it took you to figure it out, how to stay disciplined, because, the brain will say things and do things and think things. And I tell athletes, I like to say, the devil on your shoulder, the angel on your shoulder, they will always be there. Who's going to be louder? Who's going to win today? Right. And how do we train it to say the things that are going to be helpful and truthful as well? Because anyone can be their biggest enemy. Anyone can spiral down into the worst thoughts that you can imagine. But you also have the same capability to take that the other direction and build yourself up and say, what if I can do this? I can do this. Like, instead of the what if and not, and then think of catastrophic events, you can say what if and think of the best events as well. But it takes training, and it's not easy. It's just like a bad habit or a good habit. And so you got to stay disciplined with the thoughts, with keeping them on track. If you're sitting there, I mean, people probably think that I'm crazy when I describe it, but, it's a conversation in your head constantly, especially when you're performing your sport or when you're doing, taking a test, taking an exam. It's you and your mind, right? No one can hear you. Only you can hear yourself, but it's back and forth. Yes, no, don't think that. Why would I think that? We're not thinking that way today. And just redirecting, constantly redirecting and being disciplined about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And an untrained mind it makes certain assumptions about what's going to happen in the future that are unrealistic.
Yes.
That's all. And what you said, you just tell yourself the truth. If you want to be successful at anything, right, the path from here to there will be riddled with failure.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the way it works. Development it's inextricably tied to pain. You cannot separate the two. Right. And so, and you don't get to argue with reality. Right.
I love that. Yeah.
That's the thing. There is no debate. That, it's the final say. Life is designed in such a way where growth is tied to pain. You don't get to separate the two ever. Right. And so the minute that you accept that fact, right, then you no longer engage in unrealistic debates. I am going to hurt.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to fail. I'm going to find myself in the mud.
Yep.
And I'm going to have to figure out like how to get back up again. And I might as well tell myself the truth about it, right now, instead of being the kind of person who lives, with an untrained mind in fantasy land, and I'm surprised when it does happen.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Yeah.
I just love everything that you said, because it's so true, and it really is so. I mean, I don't know if you find it hard to teach, but I think it's hard to teach until somebody truly goes through something and they do it. And then they realize, okay, and it's more of the acceptance portion is like the beginning, to accept it, to acknowledge it, and to be mindful of it. And, you know, once you know that these things can happen, that you can fail, that failing's not the end of the world, that it will happen, right? And I tell this actually to athletes who fear making mistakes, especially with soccer, because that's my sport and I have a lot of soccer players. I tell them that soccer is a game of redemption. Like, you're going to lose the ball. You're going to have a bad shot. Someone's going to pass it. It's back and forth. That's why the games aren't like 70 to 80, you know? It's like 1-2 maybe for 90 minutes.
Right.
But you have to be okay with knowing that a mistake will happen. Even the best in the world are going to make mistakes. It's what you do to move forward and redeem yourself. So how do we stop, cope with it within seconds, and then bust your ass to get the ball back and do something better to redeem yourself?
Right. Yeah.
And that's life too, that acknowledging that you're going to fail, you're not going to get an A on that test every single time. You might not get into the school you want that first application around. You might not make the team you want. You might not be a starter. You might not hit the numbers you want. You might not make the tournament. But what do? Do you stop? Do you quit? Do you, try harder? Do you look at the bigger picture? What do you do? And that really is life.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to, and just what you're talking about, you have to figure out and have these tools at your disposal and at the ready.
Yes.
Right? The analogy I like to use is whenever you have an extremely difficult day, right, you've trained yourself so well that you know which tool to pick up. Right? I go to my toolbox, you know, and, today I've got to pull out resiliency, big time. That's what I have to do. And, the untrained mind just goes out and picks up pity.
Yes.
Right? And you can do all kinds, you have to do all kinds of things, and you have to know what is the best thing to do for my development in this particular situation, like right now. And it's so important to, and we're back to talking about emotions, because you have to go to battle with them, because it's so important. You must stay rational, at all times. And that is extremely difficult to do. But at the same time, flip it around and make it positive. It is so fun to try to do it.
Yeah, right? It can be. Yeah. Perspective is everything.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that, men are naturally more logical in their decision making, I think.
I disagree.
Do you?
I disagree very much. Yeah. Interesting.
As a woman, when I speak to men who have you come to someone with a problem where you tell them drama, and a man will respond and say something so logical, and you're like, well, I didn't want the logic. I didn't want the solution. I just wanted you to vent with me or say, yeah, that was messed up, or, oh, wow, did that happen? But I really do think, and I'm pretty sure I remember learning about this as well, but I think that men are more logical. They tend to be. But I'm not saying they're smarter. I'm not saying that they're more mature and make better decisions. I think just naturally they think of the logic in a situation, which is maybe goes back to like fight or flight, or back in the wilderness like decades ago, centuries ago. But you just kind of said it. You pointed it out. You said you have to be logical with your emotions, and that part is hard to master. Yeah.
No, that's very. It's very difficult, but it's also a lot of fun. And I'll back up a second, because, and it's just my opinion. My experience is that men are very, very good at behaving in ways that males are expected to behave. I'll say that. And although the emotions may not show, on the outside, right? Males can be as much or more, and are often, more emotional than females. And a lot of times they are not trained enough to articulate that.
Yeah.
They can't figure out, how emotional, they're being, but because we have an incredibly strong culture that may say that males are supposed to be logical, that you can have a storm going on inside, and to everyone else you have a responsibility to exude like coolness, and exuding coolness is not the same thing as real coolness.
Right.
So I would explain that way, and having worked with athletes, as well, especially male athletes, who step up to competition, and I can tell that they're scared, to death, to be out there, but sometimes they make a lot of effort to cover it up with false bravado, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just a part of development, as well. I've been there, as well, and that's a difficult thing to undo, and you have to have a lot of self-awareness to figure out, is this real or am I pretending, right? If I tell you, for example, I don't care what anyone thinks.
Yeah.
Right? And then I've got to go inside myself, to figure out, it's like, am I disciplined enough for that actually to be true? Or will I settle for saying that to someone, in a confident way that they'll believe me? And there's a difference between the two, and you have to have enough understanding of yourself, enough skills, at self-examination, to figure out what you're saying and why you're saying it, and if it's actually true.
Yeah.
And that's fun as well to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
We're all mysteries, and a lot of times we're the biggest mysteries to ourselves, and we don't really realize that. It's it's a difficult thing just to make a sincere effort to figure yourself out.
Yeah, and it's a journey too.
Yeah.
And that's also a grind, I would say. I mean, hey, everything is like, I think for me, when I went abroad to play soccer in Europe, and I was, it sounds cool, it was fun, there were great moments, but I was like, man, this is me and myself out here. Mom and dad are across the world, friends are, FaceTime away, sure, but it's different, and you learn, I would say I learned so much about myself, and that was probably around age 22 to 26. And in that chunk of life, I learned so much about myself. I learned how to manage myself, manage my emotions, learned how to pick myself up when I was down, how to get out of a funk, how to, recognize people that are going to help me in life, people that are there for me, not there for me. And that part it's painful. It really was painful. But it made me into who I am today, and it made me into more of a resilient human, which I love the word resiliency. Once I learned it, I thought, I know that one well. That one, it just makes you more, there's a really cool term that we're using in sports psychology. What is like the elasticity, not the elasticity of your brain, but being, I'm using my hands in terms of being able to be flexible. Yes, mentally flexible.
Okay.
And with any situation. And so it's like going into an escape room, which I haven't done yet. I would assume someone gives you something, life happens to you, and you think, all right, well, what do we do about it? It's like, okay, how do we handle this now? All right, well, we can't, maybe sit and sulk for a few seconds or a few minutes if you actually truly need to. But at the end of the day, we can't just sit and dwell in our emotions. We have to make action as well.
Right. Right, and it's all about getting better, and it's all about becoming more aware. If I'm very transparent, I'll go back a couple of paragraphs, and I told you I disagreed with you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there thinking, I didn't like the way that I said that, right? Because it places you and I in a little bit of opposition. I was like, I should have said something let's look at this kind of a different way, right? And so, I'm working on my awareness, okay, I would have rather phrased that in a way that, more preserves a human relationship, right? But I said it really quickly, right? And you have to learn how to correct yourself, be open about it, and just go. So, that's that.
I appreciate that. I mean, I'm for one, I'm not offended. I hear what you're saying either way.
Yeah.
I still stand by what I said. I mean, I think whenever we're making general decisions, I think men think more logically.
Yeah.
But not to say on ESPN, men are super emotional. They're throwing the clipboards. You don't see women doing that on soccer games. Men are holding their crying. That's very emotional as well. But when it comes to decision making, for the most part, men are usually more logical.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I don't know how many times out of 10 I would say they are, but I'll hold it to it. If you're listening, don't disappoint me. But
Okay.
Yeah, but no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, more to conclude with the episode, you've given so much advice throughout this whole thing, so I've never felt a need to say, stop and say, what advice would you like to give someone? But normally towards the end, if there's anything that's pressing, there's a topic that you think, this is a platform where anyone can hear your advice from somebody who has had a really great career in track and field. You have been a coach, you are a father, you are a husband, and you just, you've lived quite a life, and you're a professor as well, and you're teaching the good word back to everyone. And I think that's the big message, is to take what you've done with your life and give back so that more people can learn and spread the good word as well. But if there's anything that's kind of pressing of topic on your mind that you think that people need to know, something that's calling to you to say.
Okay. And this will be interesting to say, especially coming from a sprinter. Okay. My advice would be stop racing.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
That is. All right, now let's hear why.
Yeah. Because everything's not a race, right? Sometimes it is a race, but most healthy things are not a race. It's, there are opportunities to, just become better. And, more about what I mean about a race is because it has the connotation of competition. It also has a connotation of comparing yourself to others. And if you look at a lot of the research, around comparing yourself to others and how unhealthy that is, that it's something you have to put on your plate to conquer. And you got to be really countercultural, about that. You're created in, a certain way. There's only one, me. And there's never going to be another. And I have, strengths and weaknesses associated, like with who I am. And it's just very important to compare yourself to you as a discipline. Yeah. Right. The rest of the world, the external environment, they'll do a great job, of comparing you to others, and let them do it. Yeah. That's fine. And as you start to master that, just don't take the comparisons, too seriously, and I mean that as well. The definition of a gold medal, in and of itself is a comparison, right? And it's an important one that, that people place a lot of value on, but if I'm incredibly truthful, and I've tried to be, I know that I was not the fastest person, in the world, at that time. Stay rational, about that. I did very well, for me, right? I went from not being able to make a 4x1 team in high school to, a gold medal at the same time. Yeah. I know there are certain talented people who couldn't be in that position because of difficult circumstances that we have, in our world. That doesn't take anything away from, my accomplishment, doesn't take anything away from my journey. Yeah. It was a really good, journey, and I'm proud of that. And so, I would just say, just don't take things, too seriously. We have, and I, and I mean this when I say it, we have pockets of our culture that are incredibly toxic. Yeah. And you have to figure out, how to identify that and how to avoid it. There are ways of thinking, there are ways of interacting with the world, there are ways of doing things that are wrong, toxic, unhealthy, all the bad stuff. And we have to identify those, and move away and get back to, something that's, more conducive to, our own personal growth. Yeah. And we've got to teach our kids that. We have to, we got to figure out this, this whole thing. Definitely. I've had conversations with coaches who, and it's natural. I'm a gold medalist to look for talent, in my kids, right? Yeah. And I tell them, without hesitation, he's my son, but he's not me. Yeah. Right. Okay, yeah. And so, understand that when you try to assess, what kind of talent he has or what he's going to be able to do for you, or even if he's remotely interested in track and field at all.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. Right? Could not be. And I have to have the freedom to allow him, to do that, so that my dreams don't become confused, with his, because he's not me,
right.
And that's a discipline as well that I think that we have to have, as just as parents, to figure that all out, and not move, not move too fast, and don't make assumptions, about anything. And even if my son happens to be the most like a 100-year talent, in track and field, and he may not like it.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm still developing, my approach, to all of that. But there's no reason to make these inappropriate connections between, my offspring, and me, from my perspective, as a parent, because that can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I do have one last question, because we are at maybe you knew this, but in June is I think Mental Health Awareness Month for men, specifically, and so
I did not know that.
Yeah,
that's good.
I mean, I didn't want to assume. I never assume, but and so just with that being said, you being the figure that you are, the man that you are, what advice would you give to other young men or maybe young fathers or athletes struggling, and just knowing that I think trying to play the positive side of society right now, that it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's not, I think I told this to a group of men before, but it's not weak to ask for help, and it doesn't make you cool to never say, hey, I'm struggling. Because again, this whole episode has been about struggle and how that's the beauty of the journey. But when you're not okay, make sure you have that person, or make sure you have those resources to reach out to. But if you have anything to say about
I would say read and read and read and read, anything you can, about, mental health, and tackle one big thing that I think a lot of men have, and it's the inability to classify their emotions appropriately, right? Because our culture doesn't teach us that, right? For the most part, we kind of have we're trained to kind of have a binary emotional process. We're either angry or we're not, right? And we have to be able to be very detailed about what we're feeling at certain times, and why and what's triggered it. Understand melancholy, right? Understand happiness and sadness. Understand anxiety, insecurity, right? And that's something that the male culture just tells you not to analyze, very, very much. Men do things because they're insecure, about certain things, and you won't understand yourself until you start to figure out, what am I insecure about, right? It may even be your sports performance or whatever it is. I always say, I grew up in an incredibly unhealthy environment. Most men do, right? We're taught that to be a man has everything to do with how good you are at sports, how good you are with the women, right? And how much money you make, all right? It's everywhere, and it's incredibly dangerous, and it's a sickening thing that you have to figure out a countercultural strategy to do something about that, and figure out a definition that has nothing to do with those three things. Right? Yeah. Like what does it actually mean to be a man? It's not those three, and let's get a tight definition of what that means, and move on with life, that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you've been able to have the time to come here today. I really appreciate you. You have me wanting to join one of your lectures now. I've been thinking about it. I mean, I always joke with my previous professors because they have summer classes, which summer's in session. I love school, and that's why I went back for a master's. But if I could, I'd probably just go get another degree, because I like learning, I like a structured program as well.
You're welcome. So
I'll pop by maybe.
You can pop by at any time, and I'm very similar to you. Teaching the class allows me to learn like 20 times more than the students.
Yes.
It's unfair. But I get to do that, and as I put together lectures, as I get feedback, from students, and I ask them for feedback, all the time, because we have to figure out like how to make the class as enriching as possible.
As possible?
Enriching,
yes,
as possible. And as I do that, and I try to refine things, it's very, very enjoyable, to me. So I've already started for, the class that I'm going to teach in the fall.
Very cool.
And, I'll put together the curriculum and everything, and, correct some of the things I didn't do so well, like last semester, and just kind of move on from there, and make sure that, it's a course that, is time well spent. That's what I would want if I was sitting on the other side. So, yeah.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, I loved a good engaging class.
Yeah.
Something that you're truly going to learn and take away with you.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll be working to make it a good one. So yeah, all of them good ones. So yeah.
I always sometimes I use the library still because it's so close, and I come by, go to the chapel and whatnot, say hi to professors, be in their desk, and they walk in, they're like, "What the?" I won't do that to you, but but I will make an appearance. But it's been so lovely having you on the show. Thank you so much for your insight. I'm sure so many people will take a lot away from this, and so I really appreciate you being here today. And thank you.
No problem. Happy to do it. In any time, and I hope someone gets something out of it. It'll be good. Yeah.
For sure. If there is a way to contact you, can I put like your school email in? I normally put it at the bottom just in case people.
Yes, absolutely. Put in my school email, and anybody can contact me there. Have any questions or any other ways that I can help? Be happy to do something. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. No problem.
Well, with that being said, thank you again, Mike Marsh, and happy Thursday, everyone.